Welcome to the Late Game Podcast, a podcast about all things board gaming, from rolling dice to painting minis and everything in between. This week, we're discussing the struggle of learning new games and much more. I'm your host, Tyler, and with me is Kenneth.
Hello there.
And, just Kenneth.
Hello again.
Because Russ is out of town for work this week, and we weren't able to get an extra episode recorded before he ended up leaving, so we'll try our best to keep you entertained.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Once again, I would like to mention that SaltCon is coming up very soon, and all of the late game crew will be there, so come out and say hello. It's going to be, March 5th through the 8th?
Yeah, 5th through the 8th.
At the Davis Conference Center in Layton, Utah. For those of you that aren't from Utah, I assume anybody coming is probably going to be local or within a state's distance. I don't know.
Maybe you've got a pretty sweet travel budget.
That would be rad. You feel free to share. Anyway, you can get tickets for that at saltcon.com right now. And before we get too far into the episode, my son and I, we did a little review of 13 Monsters over the weekend, and I'd like to share that real quick. Thanks again, Nate, for taking time out of your busy hoverboard and Minecraft schedule to sit down to do a review with us. So what was your favorite part about the game, 13 Monsters?
It's kind of fun because it's
like a memory game, isn't it?
It's like a memory game, like a game that we have, like a SpongeBob memory.
Well, it had quite a few monsters. How many?
It had 13 monsters, and
That's
the 13th
right.
one is a ghost.
Was it a hard game to learn?
Kind of.
What was hard about it?
There's so many cards that you have to pick, and you have to match something.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't really a hard game to learn. It was just a hard game to master.
Mm-hmm.
To get all of them to match.
Yeah.
I think if we had more players, it would be a little bit better because everybody would be guessing and helping remember what was out there.
And more cards are just gone.
Yep, and then it's a bigger battle too when there's combat.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about the combat?
I don't even know what that means.
So when we fought, when you rolled the dice and you took
win.
monster parts, what happens?
You get that monster and you could build different stuff with it.
That's right. So,
like last time when we played it, I had some of the ghost parts, but he had the top, and I fought him, and I got the 13th monster.
That's right. What was your impression of the art? What did you think about the art?
It is actually really cool. I can't believe they actually did that art.
It was really nice, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Which monster was your favorite?
I think the 13th monster.
The ghost?
The ghost.
I think he might have been my favorite too. So, who won? Who won the game?
Me.
I think that's because you had so many monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah?
What does Mom have to say?
I think that's awesome that you beat Dad.
Yeah.
And not surprising. Yeah, he did. He definitely beat me.
Sounds like a good time.
It was pretty good. He didn't like the fact that there was, it's 9 rows of 9, so that's quite a few pieces to match.
Yeah, that's 81 cards.
And, I think there was like 5 missing as far as, I think there was like 74 or whatever, 75 or something that you'd pick from, because in the middle row there was a little bar that kind of takes up space.
Okay.
But he did end up destroying me. He ended up having like 4 or 5 monsters, and I had 1.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's not enough.
He just kept,
you needed closer to 13.
He just kept taking monsters from me and then beating me in battle, and then eventually we just called the game because I was done, and he was done playing for the moment.
Okay. Yeah, that happens.
He had to get back to hoverboard and Minecraft.
Yeah,
apparently.
it's intense. When you got a kid with obligations like that, you can't really get in the way too much.
Absolutely. Well, Are there any Kickstarters going on or anything that you've received that you want to mention?
Nothing that I've received recently. I did buy a copy of War of Whispers, but that Kickstarter's long gone.
Right.
And I already talked about that. I got the deluxe version.
When's it gonna be here?
It came Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Like the only thing about it, like the only complaint that I could say, I mean, obviously it's the same game, so the game is going to be awesome. But as
Right.
far as the deluxe components versus the retail components, instead of cubes, there's like it's like a little mound with a banner on it for
Okay.
a lot of the what are used for what the cubes are used for in the retail game. The way that they're designed reminds me of the guys carrying banners in Chaos in the Old World.
Ah,
And one single piece of the, I don't know, like 100 or whatever was broken, and I don't expect them to like last
Really?
forever. Yeah, they're a little bit just skinny, honestly. It's just a
Sure.
skinny post for the banner. So hopefully they're pretty sturdy. Like none of them felt like they were weak per se, but
Right.
just the design of them, I don't have super high hopes.
sure.
But I'm still stoked to play it. And the little, instead of cardboard with your faction or with your like your so there's the factions on the board, and then there's the spy factions that you play as.
Right.
So instead of the cardboard with your spy faction thing, there's little like thrown pieces that are really nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff adds to it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I decided to jump in on It's a Wonderful World Kickstarter because that looks rad.
It looks interesting. I've not played it myself, but it's something that I've had my eye on. The artwork looks awesome, and the
So-
gameplay seems
So the
Interesting.
artwork looks great. The theme of like a somewhat cynical, like that the kind of dystopia where the powers that be are telling you that it's not a dystopian future,
Yeah.
where like it's a wonderful world because the government controls everything and they said that it's wonderful.
right.
That sounds fun, and then the gameplay sounds very like there's drafting and it's an engine builder, so you're going to draft your cards, and then I've seen comparisons to like Century or Seven Wonders because of drafting,
Sure.
but like Splendor, Century, stuff like that, where
Okay.
you're collecting resources and turning them into other stuff, and those games are a hit always with family and
Right.
gaming groups and pretty much everyone. So I'm pretty excited for that one.
That's cool. When does that one wrap up?
Day after tomorrow.
Nice.
So if you're listening to this the day that this comes out,
Yeah, get on it.
You could probably still back it. There was actually a couple of big Kickstarter launches today. There was Wonderland's War,
Yes.
which looks really good. That one's kind of got me tempted, but
yeah.
enough of our friends are like it seems like there's going to be a few people that will have access to a few copies,
Right.
But I don't know if I end up like catching a couple more overtime checks before that goes, I might have to jump in on that. And then Marvel United launched today.
Is that the chibi one?
That's the chibi one.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. The gameplay looks just a couple degrees off of Marvel Champions, which I already have, and
Right.
it's got chibi art, which I'm not interested in, and massive price tag and tons of CMON minis. I'm sure the game will be cool. I think that Kevin is going to go in on it,
Right.
so I'm down to try it. I love Marvel, and if I was going to jump in on anything chibi, Marvel would probably be a good bet.
Did you
But-
see that there's Warhammer chibis?
Yeah, I did see that. And that, like, the irony of that kind of appeals to me, but they're 40K, and I'm just not that into 40K.
Right.
Honestly, if they were like Age of Sigmar or Old World, there's a possibility I'd swing by and like pick up one or two just to have like. Ideally, if they had like the 4 Chaos Gods in
Yeah.
chibi form. Like, I would be so down with having like a little chibi Nurgle. Like, what?
Yeah, no shit. I agree. I think that if they do well in the 40K realm, they may end up going the other route. And I would love to have some Age of Sigmar dudes as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I Age of Sigmar to me is just cooler. Like, I mean,
I'm bigger into fantasy than sci-fi, but
yeah, like 40K is cool, but it just doesn't quite do it for me.
sure.
There is another Kickstarter that's kind of, I believe it had your eye, and it's got mine. It's Kanban.
Yes.
Uh,
EV.
yeah, that one is super tempting.
I'm
I
working
mean,
overtime so that I can commit to that one.
Yeah, between there was a couple that wrapped up recently that I backed, and then It's a Wonderful World and it's the other one I'm back. Eon's End.
Yes.
Like, there's a few things going on right now. I'm not like, I want to get Kanban. It may or may not happen. Looking a little closer into it, because I was like, well, I gotta get the metal cars. It's
Right.
like $150 for the game and the metal cars. And then I looked at the metal cars and I was like, I don't really need those. Those are not as good looking as the wooden ones.
Right.
So I might jump in on the standard. Well,
The standard
standard
deluxe.
deluxe special awesome $100 version.
Sure.
But
I think I might do the same. I was looking at those metal cars and I thought, well, I really don't need that much more weight on my shelf. I've got plenty of wood pieces on that thing
Yeah.
and cardboard stacking up. So, and you're right. I mean, they honestly, in my opinion, didn't look quite as good as the wooden meeple cars.
no, they honestly don't. I mean, they have that kind of that Jetsons future like bubble type of look to them,
Yeah.
rather than all the angles and edges that actual modern cars have.
Right.
But yeah, the metal cars they didn't quite do it for me. That's exactly the kind of thing that I would usually jump in on. I'd be like, I have
Right.
to have the metal cars.
When I saw that,
Like,
I did the
eh.
same thing. And then I looked into it a little further and I
Yeah.
wasn't quite as impressed for the price tag.
Yeah, no, I just don't love them. But on the other hand, like if I decide to go with Wonderland's War, I will definitely get the upgraded chips and the miniatures rather
Yeah.
than the standees. Like,
Absolutely.
that's a game that it seems fun. It seems cool. A little bag builder, area control, asymmetric abilities and stuff like that. I haven't looked into it quite as deep as I definitely intend to, but it's doing a lot of things that I like, for
Right.
sure. And the components look just gorgeous.
They do. I like
and
the art
it's-
direction
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. Every visual component looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And it being from Druid City and recently playing Sorcerer City because that was Druid City
Yep.
also, right? Like, I have a feeling that it's gonna be just gorgeous once it hits the table. I
Sure.
just kind of need to look into the gameplay a little bit more before I decide whether or not it's something that I need for my house, in addition to the 2 or 3 copies that'll be floating around our friend group.
This is true.
Another bit of news that is definitely related to Kickstarter. It's slipping my mind exactly what campaign updated today, saying that there is no game manufacturing happening in China right now.
Right. I read that as well.
Yeah, it's Restoration Games.
Okay.
The folks behind
Fireball Island.
Fireball
and
Island.
the new
is
Dark Tower.
still running, or did it just wrap up?
I'm not sure. I believe
but-
it was getting close.
But that's Restoration Games, and they updated and they said that no factories are manufacturing games. China, because of the coronavirus outbreak, China has kind of locked down, a lot of factories and a lot of production,
Yeah.
and essentially a lot of what would amount to like germ pools,
Rightly so.
and games being among them, because it's non-essential. I mean, I would expect that factories that work in food and or medical are probably
Still operational,
stepped
but
up security and operational
Right.
again, but things like
regulated through the
yeah,
health and
they-
things.
yeah, it's not worth the risk to the Chinese
Oh, no
population
way.
to make sure that all these Americans get their board games,
Right.
Like whatever, hopefully everything hopefully that whole thing just gets under control, I
Right.
mean, like, regardless of the effect it has on our hobby, like that, it's a scary worldwide thing. It's
From
becoming a worldwide thing.
what I was reading, I follow Seth from Mayday Games
Yeah.
and the new publishing company that he started that did the Red Outpost game, Imperial Publishing. And he was actually in China for a little while and had to fly back based on the spread of everything happening. And he posted something today about a couple of stats that are indicating that it's slowing the amount of spread. It went
That's
from like
good.
11 3 days ago to 8 to 7 to 6. So there's a noticeable decline. So hopefully it just gets wrapped up here in the near
Yeah.
future for everybody that's affected by it.
And everyone that could be. I mean, like,
Definitely.
those kind of outbreaks, especially like the viral ones, and looking at, because I was curious, I was like, all right, so what are the symptoms? I mean, it's similar to your common cold.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that virus is gestated in you, you get a little sneezy, you get a cough, whatever, you're kind of, whatever, I'll be fine in a few days. I'll take a little extra vitamin C. Boom, you've got coronavirus and there's no cure and you're going to die.
Yeah.
Like, that sort of thing's really scary, especially the ones
Absolutely.
that come on so mild, and things like the common cold, like whatever.
Right.
So that it's definitely Kickstarter related news.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
So-
relevant for sure. Well, on the lighter side of things, what have you been playing lately?
So,
Or do we lighten things up? I remember we were mentioned something before we started
Well,
recording.
We'll start with some lighter stuff.
Okay, cool.
So on Friday, me and my wife went over to Russell's house for some games, and I finally got to play Lords of Vegas,
Okay.
which I've heard Russell talk about quite a few times. And I always thought it was Las Vegas, which is another game that I've played that I didn't really like. I wasn't a big fan of Las Vegas, but finally playing Lords of Vegas, I was like, oh, this is that game that he keeps raving about. I see. I get it. It's really good. It was fun.
That's awesome.
And
Is there anything you can compare it to? Or any mechanical elements that are similar?
I mean, there's definitely some dice placement. There's definitely some dice rolling and drawing cards. There's a ton of random, like a
Cool.
ton of random. And there's some mitigation to it, and there's some strategy. There's definitely like an area control element, kind of I would compare it almost to a tableau builder, where you build casinos, and then whoever has the high, like, and the casinos are little cardboard overlays on this city board that has the strip in the middle and then a few different blocks for casinos.
Okay.
And then each square that is the same color and touching each other, orthogonal adjacent, those make up a casino, and whoever's got the die that is the highest number on it controls that casino.
Okay.
And they'll get different payouts for different things. And as you draw cards, different casinos trigger to pay out. So there's kind of a tableau element, but it can totally be messed with by everyone else. And you can kind of screw people over. There's the total chaos of, me and you have, 3 dice each on a 6-block casino area. And I don't remember how much money it is, for an amount of money, we can re-roll. I just re-roll the dice and put them all back. So, it goes from there's a die value on the board for each space. So when that space is first bought, you put that value. So whether it's a 1 or a 6 or a 3 or whatever, so in that scenario where we've got 6 dice out, maybe the high is a 4 and you have that. And then I say, all right, we roll I try and, change it up.
Right.
And then, maybe you roll a 6 and it's like, I strengthened your position. Maybe you roll 3 6s and I'm like, damn, like, this is going to be rough. Or maybe we roll 1s and 2s, and 2s is the new high. Like,
That's cool.
and
That sounds fun.
No, it was really cool. It's like, it didn't feel like it was doing anything radically different or new that I hadn't seen elsewhere. But I honestly can't think of anything to really compare it to because the execution was pretty unique
Cool.
and the way that everything came together.
So what it was doing was well done.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it was very well executed. And then we played a couple games of Carnival of Monsters, and me and Ashley left because I had to work on Saturday.
Love that game.
Yeah, always a good game. And then Sunday, Alex and his girlfriend Brittany came over to my house, and we played King Domino, which is cool.
Yeah.
I believe I'd played it once before. It's fairly simple tile laying game. Have you ever played King Domino?
I haven't.
So one thing that they do that's really cool is all the tiles are numbered on the back,
Okay.
and it goes from 1 to like 50 or 100 or however many there are in the game. And you make them into stacks of however many players there are. So in ours, it was stacks of 3, evenly, however many tiles you're supposed to use for 3 players.
Right.
And you stack them face down so that the number side is up, and each turn pick up a stack and you line them up from top to bottom, lowest to highest, and then you'll choose, like, it starts somewhere, and you choose which one you want by putting your little meeple on it, and then that determines your turn order.
Okay.
So if you take the top one, you'll be the first person to choose the next out of the next 3 tiles. But generally speaking, the bottom ones are more valuable.
Okay.
So if you're the first player on this turn, you might choose the best tile that's out there that's going to score the most points, and that'll make you the last to choose on the next turn.
Okay.
And then you're just trying to match up, they're domino style, so it's 2 distinct sides, and you're trying to match up your terrain. And then there's certain ones that have crowns for scoring, and the biggest area with the proper crown for scoring, you score your squares times your crowns for each of your different terrain types that has a scoring element.
Okay.
And then you build a 5x5 grid.
Seems simple enough.
Yeah, it's fun. It's cool.
That's cool.
It's certainly like not super deep or complicated or anything
Right.
like that, but it's a good time for sure. We also played Draftosaurus, which is rad. That
It
game
looks
is
kinda
super
cool.
cool. Like I want to get it. I mean, I could damn near make it. But the only problem is, so you're drafting dinosaur meeples.
Okay.
So they have to be kind of small to fit in most hands. Otherwise, I could just use meeples from Dinogenics.
Yeah.
And I could totally just make the game with Dinogenics meeples.
That's
But-
cool.
But that would get pretty unwieldy because those are not tiny meeples.
No.
And
Some of
these
them
ones-
are sharp.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few. And the ones in Draftosaurus, they're properly sized. I couldn't see what Ashley had in her hand because she joined us for that game. She didn't seem like she was struggling too bad. And it's really cool. You just sort of, you draft a dino meeple, and then you place it on your board, and each little draft, so one person will roll a die, which determines a few different placement rules. So the board is divided into a couple of different quadrants, and it might be one of those quadrants, or it'll be somewhere where there's no other dinosaurs, or it'll be somewhere where there's no T-Rexes, and you just kind of place them on your board. And then there's scoring and restrictions that really reminded me of That's Pretty Clever. So in this pen, all of the dinosaurs have to be the same, and however many spaces you fill up, that's how many points you'll get. In this pen, none of them can be the same, and however many spaces determines your points.
Okay.
In this pen, you can only put one dinosaur, and then on your whole board, you have to have the most of that dinosaur more than anyone else playing. On another spot, you have to have pairs of dinosaurs. In another spot, you have to have triple of a dinosaur. And then there's a whole other set of scoring conditions on the back side of the board.
That's
So-
awesome.
So very, very the scoring really reminded me of That's Pretty Clever.
That
And,
sounds good.
and it was super good. It was really colorful, really fun.
Yeah.
Super simple, like 15, 20-minute game. Good times. And then we finished out that evening with a game of Tiny Towns, which I would very much like to never play that game again. Like it was so. I'm fine with like a good spatial puzzle.
Right.
The keyword being good. I don't know. Alex tried telling me that I need to try it again, and I was like, no, I don't know, man. I can't imagine a version of this game being better.
Right.
He was like going, so with this game, you have your little like 4x4 grid, and there's a set of cards out. Like there's like 6 different building types, and you have to put resources in a pattern on your board to build the buildings.
Okay.
And then there's also like everyone gets dealt a special secret building that has its own little combo that you then can place one of those on it.
Sure.
So the way that you get the resources is on my turn, I say, they all have names, but whatever. I say blue. Then everyone takes a blue resource cube and puts it somewhere on their board. And then it goes to you, and you say orange. And everyone takes an orange resource board and resource cube and places it on their board. And hopefully you just place that blue somewhere that the orange will actually help it rather than blocking you off.
Right.
Or whatever, and basically the game came to a point where I was trying to work with like 3 different things and kind of compromising. And there was only 3 of us playing. I'm trying to compromise between what they are doing and trying to figure out how I can best use their stuff with what I'm trying to do. And it came to a point where I had 1 square on my board and I went, okay, if Alex calls orange, I continue playing the game. If he calls any other color, I am done. He called any other color. So the game ended. I scored 7 points. And their scores were in the 30s, I believe. Yeah, with 32 and 26.
That's what I've heard.
I scored 7, and they also played probably another 6 rounds after I was out of the game.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Alex was like, dude, we played it at PAX, and we played it with like 6 people, and it was way more fun. And I was like, dude, like, that game with 6, adding that much more random into it and making it so you just have to try and figure out some sort of compromise with the people. And Brittany also was like, we had kind of a bad set of cards where there was a lot of like gray, so other colors weren't quite as useful. If you get it more spread out, a better like lineup of colors, everything kind of becomes more useful because there's more compromising to be made.
Okay.
And one random cube placement is less likely to totally screw you.
Yeah.
But with my experience of the game, my 1 play, Alex telling me, dude, it's so great with 6 players. I was like, not only would I just get up and leave, like if it was like everyone was like, we're going to play Tiny Towns with 6, I would get up and leave if I was on foot. Like I would walk home. That I just, no way. Like he was going, dude, you should really try it again. And I mean, I would, but I don't see it improving my opinion of the game.
Sure.
And I don't. I mean, it's kind of funny to shit on it right now because Russ isn't here, and Russ has bragged this game up a whole bunch of times and is not getting any kind of defense.
I can hear future Russ screaming at his headphones.
That's fine. That like he should scream at his shitty game. It sucks. I didn't like it. I mean, Alex digs it. Russ digs it. Alex's girlfriend Brittany enjoyed it. And,
right.
And I mean, I can see where there's potential, but honestly, if I'm going to play a game like that, I would grab Reef 1,000% of the time. I would go for like something like Sorcerer City if that was an option, or even Carcassonne. Like I would rather play a different spatial puzzle, one that I mean, even with the as mean as Carcassonne can be by people getting different areas and conjoining them and all of that, feeling totally screwed over by the human element of randomness No, I just didn't like it. Left me with no good feelings, and
Yeah, I
it was
understand that.
it was one of those things that when it was okay, Alex calls orange or I'm out. I was like, which do I want more?
Did you get your wish?
I don't know.
Kinda.
I mean, like on the one hand, I was done playing. On the other hand, they weren't. So
That
like
does
I was
suck.
over this shitty game and it was like, all right, merciful end. Oh, wait, I'm going to sit here for another 10, 15 minutes while you guys finish playing this terrible game that you guys are enjoying for some reason. And like, yeah, no, I there's few things I wouldn't rather do than play Tiny Towns. It was,
That makes sense.
as it stands right now, that is rock solid the worst game I've played this year. I mean, it's early in the year. There might be
Sure.
something worse, but it's the worst one by far. Like it's not even close. It might be the only genuinely bad game I've played this year, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, people like it, so
they do.
If any of that sounds appealing, go ahead and
Knock yourself
try,
out with
try
some
that
Tiny
out.
Towns.
But yeah, no, not for me, not my game.
That makes sense.
How about you? What'd you get going on? We didn't actually see each other. You didn't make it to
No.
Russ's on Friday, and
I ended up getting busy. We ended up moving stuff around here, and I built my son a PVC fort over the weekend. So
right on.
Um,
That's crafty.
it was, and my thumbs ended up getting blistered from using the little cutting tools that I had. And so, long story short, I am relieved that is over for now. But yeah, on Sunday, I ended up getting in. We didn't get to finish the game completely because they had to leave a little bit early for work, but we played some Great Western Trail 4-player. That was the Alexander Pfister and published by Eggert Spiel. So with Great Western Trail, aside from me doing the PVC fort for my son, I also rearranged a little bit here in the studio. So if it sounds better or worse, feel free to let us know. But Great Western Trail, it's a worker movement game where you travel to Kansas City multiple times delivering herds of ideally different cattle, earning you money to fund your next trip to Kansas City with more cattle. There's quite a bit to like about this game, but before I get into my likes, I just want to say that I know what Russ was saying when he talked about Teotihuacan being a simple game to teach. Because I walked into this game thinking that it's going to be a quick 5, maybe 15-minute rules walkthrough and we just get zipping along in no time. And 45 minutes later, I found out I was wrong. And not everybody at the table is a newbie to the gaming concept. I mean, in fact, I'd say all of us have played enough of these games that we should probably, be moving along. And maybe that says more about my teaching of this than it does the game itself. But yeah, it was there, and I feel like maybe what it is I'd done enough research and I knew what all the things were. There's just a lot of options is really the only thing about it.
Right.
But the game did have a lot to like, despite there being a couple of minor thematic misses. But overall, this game has more positives than negatives. Like the deck building part of the game was simple and very effective with the cattle, the different cows that you're picking. They're going to be, you'll have a starting 14 cards, and then you're going to build on that with new cows of different types that are more prestigious and better and worth more and worth victory points at the end of the game. And then the evolving trail was interesting too. It just keeps getting more and more interactive throughout the game. And as much fun as it was also frustrating because somebody would put a tile down and it forces you to stop on that tile and give them money before proceeding. And so there's ways to kind of mess with the board state. And it's also fun because when you're the guy putting them in the way and getting paid, I mean, you just reap the benefits. So
Yeah.
It's great. But another thing that I liked quite a bit was the way that the rounds worked and the way that the end game was triggered. It's really interesting. It wasn't like the traditional 6 to 8 rounds and then the game's over. The speed of the game was more determined by the players and their eagerness to deliver cows to Kansas City, because every time that you deliver cattle, you restock the job market, and the job market has the round tracker tied to it. So when you make a delivery, you slot in more workers, more hazards on the board, and more natives as well as the workers track or the job market grows. So, and then you'll move to the little end game marker. Once that row is complete with workers, then you slot it down a little bit further, and eventually it'll just slide off the board, and that will trigger the end game, giving everyone else one more turn. And then you count up your points that are on the cows that you acquired outside of your starting deck, station upgrades, hazards collected, or the special objective cards that you can acquire throughout the game. It's a really good game, and I'm eager to play it all the way through, especially in preparation for our EuroLeague.
Yeah, that's one that we need to have hit the table in the next. I guess it's only a monthly EuroLeague, so it's not
Right.
like it's super urgent. But that's is that month 4 or 5?
I think so.
Something like
It's
that.
right in the middle. Next up is what, Concordia?
Concordia,
And we're gonna put together a game night here this weekend.
I believe so.
So,
Yeah,
a study night.
yeah,
This is practice.
yeah. Team sport,
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, the game was really good. I look forward to doing a full playthrough of it instead of getting halfway through and then having to call it. But it's one of those that I can see somebody possibly running away with it, but with everybody knowing what's going on, I don't think that's going to be as likely, because there's ways for the
Yeah.
table to kind of team up without, making one person feel bad, but also without making another person, the kingmaker situation.
Yeah, see, I'm okay with the occasional runaway leader, especially in a first game,
Yeah,
because it kind of usually it shows a good strategy of either what you should be going for or what you should not do. I think of our play of Mezzo where I kind of ran away with that.
yeah,
And there's a lot of they let me do some things that they shouldn't have let me do. The other 4 guys at the table. I played strategically, and I think that I played well. I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that I won would tell me that I played well, but the
Sure.
way the amount of points that I won by leads me to believe that it wasn't just that I was playing great; it's that they had some misplays, which is to be expected in a first play, anyways.
absolutely.
So, especially in preparation for league, I'm fine with seeing a runaway leader in something like that. It's like, okay, well, we need to look out for that.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lesson to be learned. The runaway leader situation that came to mind for me first was our play of Dinogenics.
Oh yeah, I did kind of run away with that one, huh?
Yeah, dude, you just about lapped us.
Yeah.
Me specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. On it, so I was listening to another podcast today. Talking
Imagine that.
weird. Yeah. No, I spent a lot of time in my truck listening to podcasts today.
That's cool.
Like a good solid 7+ hours of podcasts today.
So what was the show you were listening to?
I was listening to Game Brain podcast.
Okay, shout out to Game Brain.
Yep, they're rad. They tend to go very conversational, and they tend to be into some of the heavier games, and they tend to go fairly deep into them. And they were talking, one of the episodes today that I listened to, they were talking about Food Chain Magnate, which is a game that I own and really, really want to play.
Yeah,
And part of the appeal to me is that I hear, it's there's the simple mechanics with the complex repercussions
yeah,
and results from those actions,
right.
and punishing repercussions. Like if you do something wrong, you're screwed.
Yeah, I've heard
like-
I've heard that's a game of consequences.
Yeah, and they were talking about it, and I guess part of Splotter's design philosophy is if you can't lose in the first turn, why play the first turn? And I go, ooh, that's evil. Like,
Yeah, it is.
and it's super, that sounds super appealing to me. Like, I'm like, oh, yes, I need to play that. And it, hearing some other, there was recently a, reprint of Bus, which is
Yeah,
the original worker placement game.
sure.
Even before Kalis. Splotter came out with Bus, and apparently that one can be super mean, and Roads and Boats, or Boats and Roads, or that Will Ferrell song from that movie.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun, and like all of them have that similar like mean feeling, really harsh, like you did this wrong, suffer.
Yeah, but they decorate it with a cutesy theme.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm
it is.
all for it.
It adds to the appeal for me.
Yeah, so we need to get that one to the table one of these days. But
Absolutely.
that one I think will be another difficult teach, because I mean we're going into our whole discussion topic. What else did you play besides Great Western Trail? We'll save this
that was
save
actually
some content
it.
for. Oh, hey,
Sadly,
we
so
can go
we're
right
ready.
into it.
Yeah. Why don't we dip into that?
Yeah. So, as I was saying, I personally like the idea of complexity. For me, is more in the execution. Obviously, like when you have a series of simple actions with, a vast array of choices or consequences or benefits or whatever. I like that. I'm for it. And I'm fine with discovering, like going on the journey of learning that,
Yeah.
If it's that thing that, like when Russ said, oh yeah, Teotihuacan is super easy to teach because you do a thing and then you move on. Yes, it's easy to do one thing on your turn, but it depends on how many things there are to choose from, in like say Cthulhu Wars. That's what you do. You do one thing on your turn. Those things generally are move, attack, deploy units, and God, I want to say there's one other like universal action. But the longer you play, the more things you unlock for your specific faction, and the more options it opens up for you.
Yeah.
And it becomes radically different. Now, you don't start off with all of those differences. You have to essentially achieve a certain goal to unlock the different abilities. But if you started at the end, like if you started with all your spell books in Cthulhu Wars, that game would be so much like, I mean, it's already radically asymmetric, and it can be difficult to teach, especially to non-gamers.
Yeah.
But if you started with all those abilities and
That'd
all
be
those
nuts.
choices, it would make it so much harder. That game, it gradually gets more asymmetric and gets more difficult.
Yeah.
Where something like Root, everyone plays differently to a degree where you're almost playing a different game. So like the complexity and the repercussions are a little bit harder to see, because not everyone's doing the same thing that you are. Not everyone has the same goal. You know, where with Cthulhu Wars, essentially everyone has the same goal. You're trying to get to 30 Doom points. And it sounds like something like Teotihuacan. You do one thing. I haven't played it, so I only have the frame of reference of Russ making it sound like trying to say that it was easy. You do one thing on your turn. I don't know how many things there are to choose from, but it sounds like they all have like,
I think there's like 8 or 9. That's
too many. For something to be simple, I think that 5 might be the magic number.
Yeah.
If you're 5, you're really towing the line for what you might call simple.
Sure.
You go past that, and you're definitely you're not a simple game anymore. And even at 5, you're really towing the line. I feel like, if there's 3 things to choose from, that's a little closer to what I would call simple.
Well, I kind of feel like a game, at least a midweight game, is good when it starts out simple, when it's 1 to 3 choices, and then you develop into the 5 choices, and then into 7, and you
the choices,
continue to
with
evolve
Cthulhu
as
Wars.
Yeah, exactly. As a player in the game, you're gonna learn more as you go. So why not have access to more in the same growth?
So hearing Russ's like I think last time that he brought up Teotihuacan, and he tried to teach it to people and went, so I thought it was simple, and apparently I was wrong. I think that what happened was the food chain magnate thing, where I haven't played food chain magnate, but listened to an hour plus discussion about it today.
Right.
It sounds like there's, a series of things that you can do, or a set of things that you can do that are relatively simple. And if you're familiar with Euro games, they're not going to be particularly difficult to understand the actions. The complexity is in the consequences and or repercussions. And I'm guessing that it's similar with Teotihuacan, where it's like, you just do a thing. And then everyone goes, well, why would I want to do this one?
Yes.
What happens if I do this one and then do this one? Well, what happens then? And I've noticed that that's there's different personality like profiles, but
Yeah.
I've found that non-gamers, especially if they have any sort of competitive side to them, or if they want to be gamers, like non-gamers with an interest in becoming gamers, they usually want to know. They want to see the end of the rabbit hole before they poke their head in.
Yes.
And I'm very much the type, personally, I'm down. Like, let's go on the journey. Let's jump in. Like,
Yep.
tell me what the basic actions are, and then let's go.
I'll go with the flow.
And I'll see if I can figure out how they work together. Ideally, we're all going into it half blind, and we can see who figures it
Sure.
out first, or figures out different ways to get through it. And maybe one way it turns out to be surprisingly better that the others at the table maybe didn't put together on their own. And that's very much, I don't know, last episode before, something like that. I was talking about how the way that I learn a game and strategize is the closest thing to like art that I have,
Yeah.
that I do. And it gives my brain that feeling of creating art. And that's exactly what I was talking about with that, is in complex games or games with complex repercussions, finding the thing and making it my own path.
Yeah. And mitigating all those negative
Yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah. I love doing that.
That makes sense. Well, one of the reasons that I haven't played more games is because the weight of learning the game can be quite heavy. Even simple games can run into rules problems, whether it's, a bad rule book or complicated iconography, but overall, just learning a game, that keeps me from seeing more gaming and even more variety of games here at home. I run into, I'll open up a rule book, I'll start going through, I'm watching a video to kind of correlate what I'm reading, and I just hit a wall, or if I'm too close to bedtime, I'm just passing right out with a rule book on my chest, and thank goodness my wife knows how much I care about those, so she keeps me from rolling over onto them. But
I have jokingly said, learning games is the worst part of gaming.
Yeah.
Knowing games is fantastic.
It is.
And I stand by that. Like, it's tongue in cheek, and there's a lot of people who do enjoy cracking open a rule book, and that's where they start figuring it out.
Yeah.
I'm much more of like, start figuring it out on the table most of the time.
Me too. I'm more tactile. Well, what would you say is your biggest rules problem that you run into, if there is just one thing, or even share a couple?
So I'm not great at teaching games, and I'm very much of the opinion of, or of the approach, like, okay, here's the setup. Now, the first thing that we do on our turn is this. Read it out of the book. Let's all do it. And let's do the first turn or even two, basically straight out of the book.
Yeah.
And then, as we get more comfortable with the game and the flow, we put the rule book away. So if a rule book, and most of the time I've found it's like some edge case or some poorly worded thing that will trip me up, and then I'll be like, a perfect example would be Brass.
Okay.
When we played Brass that first time,
Yeah.
Somehow I totally missed that or it was something
The
like
income phase.
There's the turns are each person plays 2 cards. And then at the end of an era, you do scoring and stuff. And somehow the income phase, the way that I read it the first time, my brain put it in the end of the era, not the end of the turn.
Okay.
And so we didn't do income or turn order or any of the things that happen in the income phase until the end of the first era.
Right.
I still enjoyed the game. My wife hated it. I think that she would enjoy it more now that I understand how to actually play and like use your income and stuff.
Yeah. We like making money.
Yeah. But like that's a perfect example of, and I'm not even saying that like the rule book got it wrong. It just didn't work super well with the way that I approach it, especially like I didn't sit down and read the rule book for brass.
Well,
I did like put on a Rodney Smith YouTube video and drive around doing my job with
Right.
that playing in the background that day, which you got to kind of pay some attention to Rodney for that to work.
Definitely. Well, I mean, even then, sometimes some of the questions that come up in your first play slip through and they don't make it to the video.
Yeah.
Or one of the things that came to mind for me when you were explaining the reading through of brass is maybe the placement of that phrase was in the wrong place for the way that we were trying to interpret things. And I find that rule books do that a lot. They have stuff in the wrong place. They put an important rule that's good after the first phase in the end of the book for some reason.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I find really frustrating is that you need an answer and you feel like it would fit right here if they would just put it in the rule book in this position.
Yeah.
But for some reason it's either not in there or it's in the back.
Yeah, there's a lot of rule books. One thing that I loved about the Gates of Delirium rule book that a lot of rule books, in my opinion, get wrong is most rule books will say, first thing is setup, like board setup, player area setup, turn structure, all the different things that you can do, and then it'll go straight into edge cases. This is what this specific tile does. This is what happens if these two events are conflicting and how you resolve that. This is how combat works. This is how movement works. This is how like deploying new troops works. This is how you build your deck. This is this and this and this, and then at the very end, before the credits and the art, then it gives you a scoring breakdown.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so I needed to know that when I was trying to do my turn. And that's especially bad for someone like me, who my kind of go-to way of learning the game is let's walk through a turn or
Right.
two straight out of the book. If the book doesn't give me the context for the actions that I'm doing in the form of scoring and endgame and long-term strategy of, if you do this a bunch of times, you will not score points at all.
Right.
But it's going to like look good on the board or whatever. It makes it a lot harder for me to contextualize that. And I tend to be more lost as far as strategy goes when they do that, or I have to like, all right, here's the first part of our turn, and it flip. You can score points by doing this here or that here. Flip. Second part of our turn is this. Flip. And you can't score any points off of this. This is just setting up for another part of the turn, which flip. You'll do this, which will flip. Also score you points.
Right.
And it's a lot of back and forth, where with Gates of Delirium, it was you can get the pages from the tome. Each one is going to be worth 1 point, or if you get 5 of them, it's worth 6 or whatever the scoring breakdown was. And it was right there with each action. It told you the end game scoring.
Well, that kind of answers the question that I was just about to ask, in that, are there any games that come to mind with really good rule books? Gates of Delirium was the first one that came to my mind because of that reason right there, in that they explain the level of importance of each thing that they're teaching you how to use, which I found extremely helpful in streamlining the learning of the game as well as understanding the strategy and getting into it in my mind very first play. It was amazing.
I mean, honestly, like Gates of Delirium is, I mean, it's certainly not like a heavy, complex game, but it's not super simple.
Right.
Either. It's not like a really, really simple game. But that first time playing it, it almost felt simpler than it was because the rule
Right.
book was so well laid out.
Yeah.
I've played games that I felt were more simple mechanically, but felt more difficult to learn because I was learning it out of a rule book.
Yeah.
Gates of Delirium, they hit that mark of making the rule book almost feel like having someone who knows the game teach you face to face.
Right.
Because nothing beats that. I mean, I even now, like as many times as I've played Cthulhu Wars or I've played Eon's End, I'm gonna end up hitting the rule book a little bit,
Yeah.
you know? But I could teach you better than just straight out of the rule book because I know those games,
Yeah.
you know? And the way that they laid out the rule book in Gates of Delirium was similar to that, like having your buddy teach you how to play.
It was. And that kind of leads into my next question. In what do you think designers and publishers can do to improve the learning experience aside from paying for a rules video? Because in the case of Gates of Delirium, there's not a big video guy doing their rules. I don't think they
So-
needed it.
I think that there is a fundamental problem within the industry of how playtesting happens. I think that, yes, you need to playtest a game. First and foremost, get the kinks out of the game and get like real gamers to push and prod and do the things that gamers do
Right.
and try and break
To
the
iron
game
out
and,
the things.
and get that figured out. Then you need to go to the game aisle at Target, or even better yet, Walmart, and get someone who is looking at Monopoly Fortnite Edition and say, do you have an hour that you can come and read this rule book? I'm not going to tell you anything. I need you to read this rule book, and then sit down at this table and play through one turn of this game.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it out of the rulebook with no context and no help from the designer, you need to fix the rulebook. Because I think that's what ends up happening is people go, oh yeah, this game is so simple to learn. And in the playtesting phase, the creator is so hands-on that the rulebook doesn't get playtested. The game gets playtested.
Excellent to think about.
But I could be wrong. The idea of playtesting games, there's no appeal to me for that. I would rather play a game once it's done. Playtesting sounds like work, and that's not what I'm here for. I value it. I appreciate the people who do it.
Absolutely.
I just personally have no desire to do that because I understand that you're looking to kind of break the game. You're looking for the flaws as much as you're looking for the good.
Sure.
But I wouldn't have a problem with playtesting the rulebook for people. You know, you've got the kinks worked out in the game. You know how you want the game to work. Give me a rulebook and tell me give me 20 minutes to read it or however long, you know, I mean, some games are going to take longer than that.
For sure.
I would go as far as to say the longer that the rulebook takes, the more important it is that I get it right the first time I read it.
Definitely.
You know, if the rule book amounts to a pamphlet, it's going to be a little more like on the one hand, it's going to be harder to forgive you because how could you use those few words wrong? But on the other hand, it's like, okay, it'll only take me 1 minute to reread this or touch
Right.
back on this. Whereas something like Gloomhaven, that is a novel of rules,
Yes, it is.
if I don't have a pretty solid grasp of the basic mechanics of the game, you know, edge cases, you're going to have to go to the book for edge cases. That's going to be a rule, and that's going to be a fact in most games.
Definitely.
Or every game that has edge cases. But if I can't just sit down and start playing and start going through the motions of a turn, you have failed at writing a good rule book. you missed the mark.
I agree with that. Yeah, I honestly never thought about that, playtesting the rule book and how important and helpful that could be. That
Yeah.
seems like a bit of a missed opportunity that definitely needs some attention, and I
And
think that's the right way to go about it.
yeah, and it goes beyond just like hiring a professional editor,
Oh yeah,
or a professional like proofreader, grammar, like any of that. It goes way beyond that. Like you need dummies to test the teachability of the book and how well it teaches.
absolutely.
And I would be happy to be one of those dummies. I think that I'd make a nice intermediate dummy because I'm not great at the rules part of board games, but I also know board games.
Yeah,
So I'm not going to be like the non-gamer dummy. I'm going to be the not so great with rules dummy. And yeah, I'd be down with that, you know.
for sure.
Don't make me play test your game, but I'll play test your rule book.
That's awesome. That's a good concept. Well, are there any game companies that do the rules right on most of their games that you can think of, or is there any publishers or designers that you feel like
I
they've
was
got
gonna
a better
say-
grasp than others?
Companies, unless you're looking at something like Stonemeyer or whatever the name of Ryan Lockett's company is, where essentially it's
Red Raven?
where essentially the company and the designer are synonymous. Every company is going to have misses, and it's because of designers. I find that most of the time, I feel like Eric Lang does a pretty good job of getting his idea out there. I've seen interviews with him and stuff like that, and he has kind of an everyman tone to him when he's speaking. And I think that sort of translates to his rule books. And I don't know how like heavy-handed he is in his rule books. I mean, he works with big companies, huge designer, so
Right.
I'm sure that it's more than just his fingers in that rule book.
Yeah.
But that everyman tone, I think that he, this is pure speculation. I get the idea that he goes for, let's make this available to the everyman in the rule book. And kind of, if you've ever watched him speak, he doesn't try and talk. I mean, physically, he talks right over your head because the dude seems like he's pretty tall.
Right.
But intellectually, he doesn't seem like he's talking over your head, even though like the intelligence absolutely comes through.
Definitely.
And that's kind of what you need. You need to explain complex ideas in a simple way.
Yeah. In an approachable way.
Yeah, to me that's always kind of been the true measure of someone's understanding of a topic. Talking in doctor speak about doctor stuff is great, but I am the one that has whatever is wrong with me, and I need you to explain it in words that I understand, and I'm a tree trimmer.
Right.
And,
That's a good way to put it.
and if you don't understand your field well enough to explain it to someone who doesn't understand your field, then I question how well you understand your field.
Yeah. Because this isn't an exercise to see how smart you are or to put your intelligence on the page. This is an opportunity for your game to get played. And I think that's what's going to sell more games. So look at it with the concept that you've got to reach more people is going to do you more good than it is to, wave your intellect in your rule book.
And I mean, I'm sure that a certain amount of that is his editors or proofreaders or whatever team he has helping him with the rule book, and the people behind a good rule book, because it's rarely going to be one person, but whatever that team is are some of the unsung heroes in board games. And
Absolutely.
The teams behind bad rule books should shut up and go away and just hand that thing over to a team that knows how to make it more approachable.
Yeah.
Because there's the theory in business: people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. Games aren't complicated, rule books are.
Yeah.
I would say that is true often, not always. Certainly not always, because
Sure.
there's definitely complicated games.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of times rule books are more complicated than the game actually is.
Yeah. To kind of, tie it all back together. That's exactly I'm a prime example of what you just said. I understand games, I can be taught games, I can teach games, but I have a hell of a time getting into a rule book. And a lot of that I feel like has to do with continuity. There's none within one rule book to the next at all, which is interesting because we share mechanics and we share themes and we share so many things within the hobby, but we're not concerned about sharing the structure of a rule book. In some ways there are.
That was one of the most exciting things to me about the Beyond the Monolith project that didn't seem to get off the ground, and I don't really know what the future of that looks like, but they were bringing in so many different properties and different established games to work within this console idea. I was like, these games are going to be really easy to learn, because when you're centered around this piece or set of pieces, there's only so much deviation. There's only so many iterations on this idea that you can have,
Right.
regardless of what it is. So you have to adapt essentially the same or similar mechanics for entire different genres, because like Conan and even like, Zombicide and the game that I have that you have, the 2-player game.
Claustrophobia?
Claustrophobia.
Right.
All of those games are a lot more similar than any of them are to Cthulhu Wars, which they were going to work with Cthulhu Wars. Those are all dungeon crawly type games. Cthulhu Wars is an area control combat game. How were they going to streamline and unify those different rule sets? That, to me, was the big appeal to the Beyond the Monolith thing. Like they said, we're going to save you money with whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's great. I'll just spend it elsewhere. I'll buy other games. That's fine. Whatevs. I don't necessarily need to save the money, but the mental overhead from streamlined rules, like that's
Extremely
the selling
appealing.
point to me.
Definitely.
And I'm curious to see if they if it turns out that they've abandoned the idea, or if they're just kind of taking it back to the drawing board and maybe
really gonna dial it in.
But
I hope so.
I hope so too, because it's a great idea, and that's something that the industry could really use.
Definitely. So to shift gears here a little bit, are there any types of games that the hobby is just flooded with that we could use a break on at the moment? Recently, I've heard people complaining about the oversaturation of not only zombie games, but there's legacy games is another one that I hear people complain about quite a bit. As far as we're tired of it, we want just a regular game. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
It's just tiny towns. No. So I'm kind of a firm believer in like let people like what they like. And I personally, quick count off the top of my head without even looking at anything, I can think of Death May Die, Cthulhu Deck Builder, Arkham Horror. I'm sure there's other Cthulhu games that I have.
Oh yeah,
but
Terrors of London. I know of a couple other ones. What's the one that you play in the house that you got with Lovecraft on the cover?
Oh yeah, All Manner of Evil.
Right.
There was another one that crossed my mind as
Martin Wallace one.
Yeah, Study in Emerald. So
Australia.
Personally, I have Australia, the sequel. I have enough Cthulhu games. I don't need any more. But at the same time, like that theme, I like it. So I look. If something is Cthulhu, I'm gonna look. I don't necessarily always buy it, and at this point, the theme isn't going to sell the game to me.
Right.
It has to be something more.
Yeah.
But I like Cthulhu. I like zombies. I like horror stuff in general, so I'm gonna go for it. I'm at least going to give it a look. I may or may not go for it, but I'm going to give it a look.
Definitely.
I have more than enough worker placement games and deck builders, but I like worker placement and I like deck builders, so I tend to look at them. It's that the marriage of theme and mechanics is the biggest thing. I don't feel like there's anything that's oversaturated, because if there was, then it wouldn't work anymore. Like,
Yeah.
they would stop,
Yeah.
I have a hard time with legacy games in the execution. I love the idea.
Yeah.
I really love the idea. I play video games.
Right.
Like, on Saturday, when our thought of like a later start to a board game night, when that fell apart, like, I was elbow deep in a video game. Like, it essentially made no impact on my night. I was already in a campaign doing stuff,
Yeah.
like I was already doing that. So like the idea of translating the progression and the story and all of that
Right.
to a board game, it sounds great. That's why I have a couple of legacy games. The fact that I don't have a place that I can keep something like Gloomhaven set up and secure,
Yet.
and that I just don't have as much. Honestly, if I had the space, I would create the time. If
Yeah.
I had a space that I could have that set up, I would be like, all right, so Wednesday is going to be my legacy game night.
Yeah.
And whoever my legacy game group is, let's get together on Wednesdays. On Thursday works better, we'll do Thursday, whatever.
I'm
but,
in.
But I would do something like that if I had that space. I would create that time.
For sure.
But the time, I don't have like a ton of extra time for it, and I certainly don't have the space for it. So legacy games don't work super well for me. But that's not to say that, like, there's too many of them, because they keep
Yeah.
selling and people still love them.
Yeah.
And that's great. And I'm very much for like what you like, except Tiny Towns and Exploding Kittens. Don't like those.
Well, it's kind of hard for me to really weigh in here, because I feel like I've just recently just scratched the surface as far as a variety of games that I've played personally. But if there was one type of game that I really wouldn't miss if I didn't see it on Kickstarter anymore, I'd say it's the Against Humanity type games, the copycats, whether it's one of the ripoff of Cards Against Humanity or another attempt at being as offensive as possible, like with Exploding Kittens. I'll pass. And I'm just not attracted to that type of game myself, because I often have a hard time finding a game in the middle of all that bullshit.
I view, like, so I play Cards Against Humanity. I have most of the expansions. I have a ton of Cards Against Humanity, and I'm fine with it. I don't reach for it with gamers, because to me it's not a game.
That's the thing. It's more of a drinking activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game like beer pong is a game. Sure, it's a game, but we don't get together and we don't wrap up a game of A Study in Emerald and go, all right, so who wants to play beer pong now? Like, and then after beer pong, we'll throw down on Food Chain Magnate. Like, that's not, like, one of these things is just not like the other.
No, but I would be okay hanging out with that crowd.
Yeah, no, those guys would be fine. But, like, that's just not the way that it generally goes.
Right.
I'm sure there is a group out there that's like that, and I would love to be invited to that party. But
they're just not normally cohesive.
It's not a one-to-one thing. So to me, Cards Against Humanity, like, I have a hard time saying it's not a game, because there's rules and there's points, and there is genuine strategy to it. You can strategize to win at Cards Against Humanity.
Right.
But for me, it doesn't feel like a game, so I don't treat it like a game. To me, it's not a game. Even if everyone else at the table is playing a game, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm involved in the same activity. We're all having fun, but I'm not playing a game in the way that my brain thinks of playing a game.
Right. Well, on the other side of that coin, are there any types of game that you wish there were more of? For me, I'd say it'd be a cooperative worker placement game, because one, I love worker placement, and I love cooperative games, and the melding of the two just seems like a really nice combination for me. Either that or some more simultaneous action games, because downtime is such a mood killer for my son. And if we had more games with less waiting, I think it would be awesome for him.
Yeah. I would like to see I'd like to see what the next big thing is. I'd like to see the next card drafting, deck building, worker
Roll and
placement,
right.
roll and write, like whatever the next big mechanic is. I would like to see what that is. I can't even speculate. I have
Right.
no idea what else there could be. But I mean, there's something, and I'm excited for it.
That's cool.
I look forward to seeing it. I would like to see some more well thought out and smooth implementations of taking more than one mechanic and using them together. There's a game coming that me and Kevin did a group pledge, and it was through Kevin, so I don't get the updates regularly. I want to say it was called Ignite. That is like an arena combat game with deck building. That sounds great. Things like Wonderland's War, where it's a bag builder and area control. That sounds like it's going to be a cool mix.
Right.
Court of the Dead, that has literally every single game mechanic, and each one is a different phase of one single turn, is not what I want to see in games. Don't stuff more shit that doesn't have any place there.
Right.
A good, elegant, smooth execution of mixing things that haven't been mixed before. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. That makes sense.
The
Any
other thing
themes that you like? Any themes that you think that we need more of? I think we need a good Western. Preferably with minis. There's a couple good Western games, and there's been more lately. But I think that Western's one that...
For me, Westerns, like I like Westerns, but I like gritty Westerns.
Yeah.
Like Tombstone's fine, but I like Deadwood.
Right.
And it would be hard. I don't know. Gritty and board games don't always go super well together.
This is true.
And it's easy to cheese that up. I think a good spaghetti Western board game is, if it's not already out there, it's on the horizon. But a good gritty Western, I don't know. I'd like to see that. I don't know that there's any like real themes that I feel like they're lacking. What I want is what I'm into lately, which is a simple set of rules with massive strategy. you know? And
Yep.
I want more games that I play it and then I keep thinking about it. I want to play it more, and I want to strategize, and I want to learn the game, and I want to hone my gameplay like a skill.
Yeah.
The way that I think about Brass and Pipeline. Those are two games. I actually saw on Board Game Geek, someone developed like essentially just a score attack solo variant of Pipeline, where you just are trying to get the best score, and you do some things to try and simulate the opposition of another person and the obstacles that another person creates. And there was a couple of different like unofficial solo variants for Pipeline that I want to try, because I think about that game way more often than I usually like. I've still at this point, I've played it once, and it was like a month or two ago. It's still kind of in the back of my mind at all times.
Yeah.
I want to get better at that game. I want to see what else it has. I want to really peel back the layers, because that game to me is like an onion.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
For sure.
But it's in these thin little layers that are really easy to pull back, and you can just find more, I mean, I want more of that. I want more games that are not too terribly complex to learn the basics, and the complexity comes in the decisions.
Right.
Which I know there's a ton of those. I just need to find more of them, and get more of them on the table, like Food Chain Magnate. It's sitting there on my shelf.
Absolutely.
Like it's absolutely there. I own it to the maximum amount that I can own a thing.
Yeah.
I just haven't played it yet.
Well, I've got a handful of things crying for my attention as well. Most of my Lacerda collection, Lisboa on Mars, and soon to be Kanban EV.
So what themes do you feel are missing?
I love the fact that we're getting more dystopian future type things. I love that concept because, as much as I love the post-apocalyptic theme, I feel like there are not a ton of games that are doing that well. Whereas this dystopian future is something that kind of lends this really interesting, thought-provoking gameplay that I really have enjoyed looking into. With after you picked up was it Transhumanity? PAX Transhumanity?
PAX Transhumanity.
I looked into that a little bit more, and I was, intrigued by what is going on in the game.
Yeah.
And I want to get, saturated in that theme while I play it.
Yeah, that one. There's another game that I own that I've yet to play, Euphoria. That's another
Yeah.
the almost like tongue-in-cheek, satirical, bordering on cynical dystopia.
Right.
That's great because the dystopia where the world is falling apart and everything's bad and it's up to you to survive. There's games that translates well, but you're honestly that mode of thought, you're kind of limited to. You can have a war game or you can have a dungeon crawl because it's so grim and you have to do everything to survive. Like, place this guy in this area that will give you one resource, and it's like, what? Like worker placement,
Right.
We have jobs still, like Mad Max, that wasn't a career, like that was a way of life, man.
So if nothing else, I just realized that we have somebody to do all of our video trailers from here on out.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So to sum things up, if you have any tricks or tips on improving the learning process, please let us know. Also, if you have any games that you're sick of seeing or some that you'd really like to see published more often, let us know that as well.
And please, for the geniuses out there, please develop something like in the Matrix where he plugs in the thing to the back of his brain and then he downloads Kung Fu into his head. Please develop that for board games because I hate learning them, but I love knowing how to play.
I'm so on board for this. I'll kickstart the hell out of that project.
Dude, I will invest so much more than I need to in that technology.
Awesome. Well, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or whatever podcatcher that you use, or send us an email to thelategamepodcast@gmail.com, and you can also find us at thelategamepodcast.com. Thanks again for staying up with The Late Game. Did I just get fired from the podcast?
Did I just get voted off the island?